Good afternoon, dear students. Let's continue the classification of the synthetic dyes in this lecture so that the classification part completes. As we have seen, the classification on the basis of the source of the materials, the dyes can be classified into two types, natural, synthetic. Then we have seen the classification on the basis of the chromophore or the chemical composition. Now we see the another classification of the synthetic dyes on the basis of the application. In this lecture, we should understand the classification of the synthetic dyes on the basis of the application, and we can classify the various dyes on this basis to acidic dyes, basic dyes, direct dyes, modern dyes, azo dyes. Azo dyes we have classified before also. Sulfur dyes, VAT dyes, as well as there are other types of the dyes on the basis of the application we should see. What is the learning outcome? By this lecture, you are able to classify every kind of the dye. If we are able to ask, you can classify on the basis of the groups, you can classify on the basis of the application. So each one of the dye name gives us you understanding which type of the dye it is. So here you can complete the classification, the acid dyes, basic dyes, direct dyes, modern dyes, azo dyes, sulfur dyes, VAT dyes, even including some other dyes. So let's see the classification based on the application on which we can classify the synthetic dyes to the fiber, as well as we can say the dyeing method. We are applying the dye on the fabric. So on the basis of that, we can classify the synthetic dyes into the 7 types. The acidic dyes, which is also called anionic dyes. Basic dyes, which is also called cationic dyes. Direct dyes, which directly used. Azo dyes, it is also coming in the category. It is also classified on the basis of the chemical composition as well as on the basis of application. The modern dyes, sulfur dyes, and the VAT dyes. So these are the 7 types of the dyes on the basis of the application we can understand. Paper, nylons, and the polyesters. So besides the use of the animal product dyeing like wool and silk, it is also used for coloring the paper, nylons, and the polyesters, the basic dyes. We can have the example of the basic dyes. Azo dye come in this category of the basic dyes, as well as triphenyl methane dyes are also the basic dye. So the main thing, if we are using the azo dye in the application, means the cationic part goes on attracting towards the fiber, always having this concept in the mind. If we are classifying the acid dyes, means the anionic part goes with the attaching to the fiber, and the basic dyes is having the cationic part attached to the fiber. Now the third category in this classification of the dye is direct dyes. The direct dyes are the water soluble anionic dyes but are not classified as the acidic dyes. So this is very important. These are also the anionic dyes, means the anionic part is there in the compound, but it is not classified as the acid dyes because the acid group which is present in this compound is not having the means to attach the fiber. So it is not having the application of attaching to the fiber here, the anionic part. That's why it is not classified as the acid dyes. But they are having the anionic part and they are the water soluble anionic dyes. It is used for dyeing the cotton, paper, leather materials. So they are having the specific name. For example, the Direct 26. So it is the example of the direct dye which is having the anionic part. So it can be used directly in the application. The next class is the azo dyes, and we all know at least one azo group should be attached to the compound, either to the one or the often two aromatic rings. So they come in the category of the azo dyes, and they are produced on the textile fibers and can be have in the application for dyeing cotton, rayon, polyester, and one of the important class is the phenyl azo beta naphthol come in this category. So the azo group goes on directly attaching to the fiber which is having the azo dyes, and if it is having the cationic group, it is also act as the basic dye. The next class come up as the modern dyes. What are modern dyes? Some of the dyes combine with the metal salts to form an insoluble colored complexes. Means these are the reactive product act as a dye. So when it having the reaction with the metal salts, it form the insoluble colored complexes which are used as a dye for dyeing the cotton, wool, as well as other protein fiber it is used. So the example of these dyes are anthraquinone derivatives. It is having the modern red 11. Even the azo dyes, when react with the metal salts, it form the insoluble colored complexes. So with the azo dye, it forms the modern dye, as well as anthraquinone derivatives also there which act as the dye. The example of this category is the modern red 11. It is one of the important example of the modern dyes. The next is sulfur dyes. It is applied to the cotton from an alkaline reducing bath with the sodium sulfide as the reducing agent. So it is also chemically prepared by reacting with the sodium sulfide which act as the reducing agent. So the sulfur content come up in the compound which goes with the binding to the fiber. So it is of low cost and having very good fastness property, color fastness property towards light exposure. So on the light exposure, the color do not fade out. So this is an important property the sulfur dye is having due to the this compound of sodium sulfide with the sulfur content in the compound. It is of low cost to be used in the large scale and having the very good fastness property towards light, which is essentially required in the application. So the next class is the wet dyes. These are the insoluble complex polycyclic molecules which is based on the quinone structure. The quinone structure is having the one benzene ring with the two carbonyl groups. Here you can able to see. So this is having one carbonyl attached to the another carbonyl group. So it is a totally insoluble complex with a polycyclic molecule having this quinone structure. The important example of this category is wet blue 4, which is also named as indanthrene. Understood? It is used in the synthetics, plastics, as well as oils and waxes for the coloring. So these are also the insoluble complex polycyclic molecules prepared synthetically. Now we can see after, on the basis of the application, we can have the other dyes to understand it. The one of the dye here you are able to see is the fluorescent dye, which is gives the important color, mainly used in the application of the sports good. So it is having the specific application where it is used. The fuel dyes, it is specifically used in the application of the fuels. The leather dyes, which are used for the leather materials. The Lenco dyes, it is used in the electronic industry and the paper. So for a specific application, they are also on the basis of that they are prepared for their use. The oxidation dye, it is one of the important dye which is used for the hair color. All the hair colors is having this kind of the dye, so that it easily oxidize with the oxygen and provide the color. So optical brightener, it is used in the textile fiber and the paper. The another is the smoke dye. So we have, it is used for the military activities. So specifically for, and sublimation dyes for the textile printing. We have the printing process, the whole cloth should be printed by this sublimation so that it can easily give the color by vaporizing. So this is important classification we have seen in this lecture, and we have completed all type of the classification of the synthetic dyes. So now we go for the theory of the dyes in the next lecture. Thank you and take care.